Hi, everyone. Welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We are the book podcast where we read and discuss classic books. Today, we are reading and discussing another classic book. I'm your host, Kyle Davis, along with a girl who doesn't really like the theater. I don't know. Does that even make sense? My sister, Meredith.
Of the theater.
Yeah, that one didn't make sense.
No.
You don't like grimy, dirty theaters, though, run by fat men.
No, I don't. Although, I probably shouldn't tell you this story. But now I've gone and done it.
Well, you haven't done it yet.
That's true. I could save it. No, when I was 15, 16, I had two friends. One was 18 and one was my age. And we went to a really seedy part of Hagerstown.
So Hagerstown.
Yeah. And the 18-year-old was like, look, I'm going in this porn shop and you can come with me or you can stay out here in the street. And I was like, well, I don't want to stay in the street. She's like, well, then you have to come in. I was like, I don't want to come in. I don't want to stay in the street. I don't want to sit in the car. I don't know what to do.
Oh, no.
So I had to go in, and it was a terrible experience. And don't touch the walls. It was gross.
Oh, dear.
So that was my only seedy theater I've ever been in. And it was only because my big brother wasn't there to protect me from the bad influences in my life. This is your fault.
All my fault. Completely my fault. The key question is, was this porn shop located next to a landscaping company? That's the key question. All right, so with that out of the way,
it wasn't that ritzy.
No, not that nice. So we are talking about Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. As you heard, we do get into a little content issue in this section, so I apologize in advance, but we are discussing how the characters discuss this issue. And so let's get into it. So when we left off in Chapter 7, Dorian had just taken his friends to see Sibyl Vane, the love of his life, the greatest undiscovered actress that London has yet to see, and she's terrible. And he's embarrassed, and he goes back to talk with her, and he's very upset that she would so embarrass him in front of his friends and was such a terrible actress. But she says, don't you realize I was a terrible actress because I love you so much that I can no longer love the stage and I can no longer pour myself into the part because now I just live for you. And now Dorian says, but you disgust me now because you're a bad actress. So, it's very gift of the Magi, right? Like, she cut off her hair to give him the comb. So he leaves, and she's crying and weeping, and he gets back to his house, and he realizes the picture is changing to show this cruelty. He's a little upset by it, and he says, you know what? I promised to marry her. I am going to make this right. He decides he's going to marry this girl. So next morning, so now we get into Chapter 8. Chapter 8. He wakes up, and he sees the picture has changed some, and
he confirms the picture has changed because he thought, well, maybe it didn't, but it did.
And he makes this curious decision that he intentionally decides he is going to use this picture to atone for his sins. Like he's kind of, the previous night he was sort of freaked out by this whole thing, but this morning he's all in. He's like, this picture is going to take my sin away for me. It's cool. And he writes this letter. This beautiful fit of passion. He writes this wonderful letter to Sibyl about how much he loves her and how terrible he was for her. Or to her. See, when I take a drink, you're supposed to fill the dead space there. That's co-host rapport. But anyway.
I wasn't even looking at you. I was looking at my book.
You're supposed to have already read the book before the episode.
I did read it, but I didn't remember the letter. So I was searching for the letter before I called you out to say, like, he doesn't write a letter.
Well, we don't hear the letter, but anyway.
We don't hear the letter.
Well, we didn't get to see actually what he wrote. He just said it was the greatest. Anyway. Well, he had done this while ignoring the morning mail. So his boy Victor had brought in the morning mail, and he sees there's a letter from Harry, but he's like, ugh, Harry, I don't want to hear what garbage he's going to fill my head with. But then, and he tells Victor, hey, I don't want to see anybody today, man. I'm out of town, or I'm out for the day. Well, a little later in the day, there's a frantic banging at the door. It's Henry. Henry says, Dorian, I know you're in there. I've got to talk to you. And he comes in, and Dorian tries to forestall him. Don't talk to me, Henry. I don't want to hear your crap. I am going to marry Sibyl Vane. And this is...
But it goes
Harry
back
explodes.
It goes back and forth in like a Laurel and Hardy, like I think you're talking about one thing and I think you're talking about the other thing. And it's like Lord Henry, who's also Harry, if you're following along, everybody. Harry/Henry is so excited actually at what he thinks is Dorian's reaction to Sibyl Vane's death, because they have not they have established
that fact.
Yeah, they have. Dorian doesn't know yet, and he's all like, oh, I'm over that. It's fine. It was brutal, but it taught me to know myself better, and I'm not sorry it's happened at all. And he thinks just like the breakup and the theater, and Henry's like, oh, I'm so glad you took it that way. I was afraid I'd find you plunged in remorse of that nice curly hair of yours.
Yes, exactly. I was about to say, this is sort of the first glimmer of humanity that we get from Henry, but he quickly drops that once he's like, oh, Dorian's cool with it? Oh, well, I can not pretend to be upset by it then.
He was probably rushing over to be like, Dorian, this is why you have to be cool with this. Listen, it's fine. Yes. You would have broke up anyway.
Right. Well, as we find, Harry's motivation for making sure Dorian is cool is because he doesn't want Dorian to be involved in the inquest.
Right.
He's like, look, man, there's going to be an investigation. Did they know your name over there? Did anybody know who you are? Oh, well, she knew my first name, but nobody else knew who I was, so I'm probably good. He's like, oh, good. And we get this, I don't know, wonderful line where Harry says, one should never make one's debut with a scandal. One should reserve that to give an interest to one's old age. So
you're supposed to have a new scandal when you're old, or are you supposed to bring up a previous scandal?
Well, I think new scandal. I think when you're old, it's okay to have scandals, what he's saying.
Oh. You should have met Sibyl when you were like 70. And then this should have all transpired. And then you would just be an interesting, like, kooky old man.
Exactly. Well, or creepy, as you were.
Well.
Yeah. So once he does find out about Sibyl being dead, Dorian is quite happy. He's like, oh, well, this is great.
No, not at first.
Well,
a cry of pain broke from the lad's lips. I think Sibyl dead. It's not true. A horrible lie. He's very upset at first.
Is he though?
Like 5 to 6 minutes.
Very quick. Yes, there you go. It passes very quickly because he realizes that this death of hers has him produce the most passionate letter he's ever written, and he's very proud of this letter. So he's glad that she has stirred these emotions in him. But he then, very quickly, he feels it very selfish of her to kill herself. And he sees it as she has done something to him now.
He thinks at first he murdered her.
Well, he certainly broke her heart.
He goes from, I have murdered Sibyl Vane, all in the same, like, paragraph of speech, to she had no right. It was selfish.
Right, exactly. Yeah, he definitely says he's not heartless. He says, you don't think me heartless, do you, Harry? But I think all of his actions quite point to heartlessness.
Yeah, I pulled out that quote. I'm glad you don't think I'm heartless. I'm nothing of the kind. I know I am not. And yet...
Yet.
And yet, you must admit that this thing has happened. Does not affect me as it should. He's like a self-aware wolf right here. And it seems to me to be simply like a wonderful ending to a wonderful play. Really, Dorian?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about, Romeo and Juliet, how romantic and wonderful that is, quote unquote, as the two 14-year-olds
Teenagers
kill
kill themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Which, segues nicely into our creepy line of the week where Harry says, "Oh, I see by the Standard, the newspaper, that she was 17. I should have thought she was almost younger than that." Like, Harry, how much younger did you think this girl was? Like 14, 15? Like, come on, dog. This is a little wrong here.
He doesn't, Henry doesn't have much regard for women at all because
No.
Dorian is slightly remorseful. He was cruel to Sibyl. Like, okay, maybe it's not my fault and I'm not heartless, but I was cruel. And Henry's like, I'm afraid women appreciate cruelty, downright cruelty, more than anything else.
Right.
We have primitive instincts and men have emancipated us. It's funny to me that Henry doesn't seem too interested in women, but yet he knows so much about them.
Well, because he's had so many romances.
Yeah, go look at your 17 pictures of Dorian again, Henry, and then tell me what you know about women.
Right, exactly. And then Henry gets into this little story talking about, one of his old loves, because he tells Dorian not to cry over Sibyl Vane. She was very uninteresting. And, Dorian says the whole thing was, quote, a marvelous experience. And Henry goes on to tell him this story of this woman who had loved him, and he ceased to be interested in her. And, he actually ran into her the other week at a dinner party and was seated next to her, and she just wanted to talk all about the old romance they had.
She's still pissed.
Exactly. But he says, it was great that it was all over because, she ate a lot at dinner, and that was really gross. So he was not happy with that. So
never trust a woman who wears mauve, whatever her age. I was like, shit, I love mauve.
Or a woman over 35 who's fond of pink ribbons.
That's true. Ooh, yeah, I wouldn't. I think I agree with that, actually.
You don't like pink ribbons anymore?
Not like in my hair.
Oh, well, I mean,
Viola can have them.
I mean, don't you put them like I don't know, hanging on the wall?
Streamers.
There was, years ago, we used to really watch, because she loves home renovation stuff, we'd watch Extreme Home Makeover.
Mm-hmm. That was a long time ago.
Or I guess technically Extreme Makeover Home Edition.
Mm-hmm.
Because originally there was just a makeover show. Anyway, we just refer to it as Extreme Home Makeover because it kind of makes more sense. They should have changed the name. But one of the designers on there, Paige? Was that her name? I can't remember.
Sounds right.
But she was, a grown woman in her 30s or 40s or whatever, however old she was, dressed in nothing but pink. Always, like that was her like brand basically. Like she wore pink. I think she was kind of doing, and she had like pink tools, pink tool belt.
Maybe it was just shtick for the show.
I think it was, I'm a girly girl, but also I'm a builder and a carpenter, and, because she designed all this stuff and built stuff. And so I think it was sort of, that kind of thing too. But when I read that quote, that's the picture I got in my head of a woman over 35 fond of pink ribbons. Anyway.
They're trying hard with like girls' toys now. Every now and then I see toy commercials, and there's like something cave something, and it's like girls who like dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs are pink and sparkly, and it's just Barbie, and they added like it's like basically Barbie. It's not Barbie, but whatever. It's a Barbie or a Bratz or a OMG. That's a thing. OMG dolls style, and
OMG surprise. They're OMG surprise dolls. Come on.
How do you know that? You don't even watch TV.
Because I know things. I surf the internet and I know things.
Anyway, they just like added a dinosaur. I'm like, I don't know if is that what little girls want? Don't they just want a dinosaur? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
surprised Vincent
So,
wasn't like, I want that rainbow purpley sparkle dinosaur.
so I'm not a child psychologist, obviously, but I having a girl, which I have, as well as boys, I'll tell you what she wants less than pink things because she hates pink things, and she's our little. Did not encourage us at all, but she is definitely like our junior feminist. It's so cute.
Yeah.
But she's like, there has to be a girl in every show, and why do the girls always are stupid in TV shows? And I show her a lot of cartoons from the 80s, so that's why, honey. But
Yeah.
really what she wants more than the pink, and this kind of dovetails when Lego brought out their Friends line a couple of years ago. They did research in the way that girls and boys play with Lego to decide how to create this line, because they had previously in the 90s they had tried a girls line, or the early 2000s, that failed, and so they wanted to do it better, so they kind of put more research into it. And what they found is boys, when they play with Lego, they want to dump the pieces out and put the thing together and get the toy and then play, right? Whereas a girl wants to build a little bit, and then she'll do a little story, and she'll kind of play, and then she'll build a little bit more. So what they did with the Lego Friends, as opposed to the regular, quote unquote, gender neutral boys Legos, is they broke the packaging down into smaller bits so that each individual bag kind of was its independent element of the larger set. So you could build one little thing and start playing right away and building those stories. And so just the different way that girls and boys play with things. So point being, the pink is not the deal. It's having the story, that's why girls generally tend to play with dolls, because they'll create a story and a family and make a scenario and kind of interact. Whereas boys will just pick up a thing and go run around the house making noise, which is what my other two do.
Vincent wants all of his things to talk. Everything should talk. And so he lines them up and they have meetings. And so we've had plenty of support group meetings for all the stuffed animals. And he likes to observe. Sometimes he involves himself in the talking, but it's extreme. Like, mommy, make my chicken nuggets talk to me. And we have to talk about how they want to be eaten or they don't want to be eaten, and how they want to play in his stomach and be together with the food that he ate yesterday.
Wow.
And I have this whole bit called the woodpeckers, and it's getting to the point where it's very demanding. And he's like, I want to talk to the woodpeckers. Like, I'm not even a person, and these aren't my hands. And I'm like, we're tired. I don't want to talk. And he's like, you're not tired. Talk to me.
Oh my goodness. So it sounds like he's going to be a consultant, basically. He's just going to watch the board meeting and then tell him what to do, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's a career path already laid out for him. All right, so
back to the book.
Back to the book. So this is not an action-packed section of the book. So that's sort of what happens in chapter 8. Basically, Harry comes over, tells Dorian that Sibyl has killed herself, and that's it. A couple of notes I have. Dorian is really egocentric in multiple ways. He only he looks at this suicide through the lens of what has happened to him, what Sibyl has put him through with killing herself. Mm-hmm. And he then, towards the end of the chapter, realizes fully, like he's come to accept, that this picture is going to do the 8. And somehow we've gone from, very quickly, I mean...
Oh, yeah.
Wilde sort of elides over it, but going from, in the beginning, this picture was showing, like, his sin and his cruelty, and at the end of this chapter, Dorian's just said, oh, yeah, this picture's going to age for me. Oh, it is? Okay. Sure. I mean, I don't think we've established the physics of how this picture magic is working, but Dorian has just decided that the picture is going to age and he won't. So we've gone from just...
Well, that was the wish, right? In the beginning, the very beginning, when it was like, the picture is so beautiful and it's the real me. Right, remember them talking about the picture was the real him, and he's like, oh, how I wish
Right.
and I would remain unchanged and the picture would change. So I think
Right.
while the cruelty was the first thing he noticed, which I think was a revelation, like uh, I think, I don't know so much revelation to Dorian, but as readers, like, oh, maybe your cruelty, your sin, your unkindness, the bad parts of you actually change you physically also.
Right.
How you end up looking like Mitch McConnell or something like that. I don't know.
Exactly.
That might be unfair. Or not.
Dude did have polio, so, you know.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, like I think in his 20s or something even.
Was there not a vaccine then? Is he that old?
He's pretty old. Anyway.
So I think that's where that got pulled in, that it's also going to age. And so
Yeah.
The thing about,
I just think it was interesting. We went from this picture is going to take my sin to, oh, it's going to age. You know, like those two things, like everybody ages kind of sort of the same, I guess, but people sin very differently. You know,
go ahead.
I was going to say you could have like an extreme sinner, and that I would think that would, if the picture's taking on his sins, that would change it more rapidly than someone who generally is a good person and slips up and has cruelty and anger, and it would change it a little. I don't know.
Well, he has this thought that perhaps he could save himself yet. Perhaps the picture might change in a good way, or maybe he has it in a different chapter. But
no, I think that's kind of what he says.
Yeah, like, why does it have to have my shame? What if I'm a good person?
Right.
And I could save my picture, I could save myself. And then he's like, oh, but I'm going to get old. So what's the point? If I'm going to get old, I might as well be a terrible person. Like, if my picture's going to get ugly anyway, because my eyes will sink and I'll get crow's feet and whatever, it might as well show my sin. So he like gives up, because aging seems to be the worst possible thing that could happen in this book.
It absolutely is. Because he says, Harry says to him at one point, there's nothing that you, with your extraordinary good looks, will not be able to do.
Yeah.
And then Dorian says, but Harry, what if I become haggard and old and wrinkled? And Harry says, well, dear Dorian, then you'd have to fight for your victories. As it is, they are brought to you. No, keep your good looks.
Yeah.
Which, modern research bears this out. Quote unquote, attractive people get hired more readily and have better jobs and make more money. And so there's a grain of truth in here.
Yeah, weren't you just talking about we were talking about the height thing at the beginning of this?
We were, before the pod started. My wife just discovered a thing I've been telling her for years and years and years. 14% of the American population is above 6 foot, yet 97% of American CEOs are above 6 foot. So we have
perceived. Right,
we have subconsciously equated height with leadership and strength and whatnot. That's absolutely, there's zero correlation between the two things. Says the 5'7" guy. No chip on my shoulder at all.
Does your wife not believe you when you say things like that? Because she thinks it's coming from you, and so it's just you complaining. Yeah, my husband doesn't believe me either. And I'm like, almost always right.
Right?
And the other day...
It's frustrating being right all the time. It's a burden.
Right?
I wish they would understand. Anyway.
Even to the point, like, both times that I was pregnant, he didn't believe me. I'm like, no, I took a test. Look, it says I'm pregnant. He's like, nah, I don't... Let's go get another one.
He disbelieved the test?
He did. I don't know. I don't see two lines. I'm like, there are just two lines. It's distinct right here. Wow. So I had to do like 2 or 3 other ones. And then just the other night he said, talking about Viola was born like 3 weeks before we expected her. He's like, when you told me your water broke, I was pretty sure for about 30 minutes, you just peed yourself. I'm like, I know the difference. It happened before. It was like the second time that it happened to me. What do you mean you didn't believe me?
I can't tell the difference between peeing, which I do multiple times a day for the past 3.5 decades, and this other sensation, which is completely foreign. Nope, couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, he never believes me. I'm glad you
right.
experienced the same thing then.
Well, my water's never broken, but yeah.
Well, that's
Anyway, so we
what I was
we
referring to.
we finished chapter 8, and Dorian, at the end of this chapter, he's actually pretty excited to see his soul reflected in the picture, which I guess in a way is, I can understand, because he's going to get this introspective look into himself that no one else on the planet has ever gotten before. He's going to see a visual representation of his soul.
He vacillates back and forth. Like, it's going to be a pleasure watching it. And we'll see him change his mind.
Right. He does say that a feeling of pain crept over him as the thought of the desecration that was in store for the fair face on the canvas. I mean, he loves this picture. He loves seeing this picture of himself.
Yeah. Doesn't he own a mirror? The mirrors are invented, are they not?
They are. I mean, photographs are invented. I mean, he's knocking out selfies for Harry, so, you know.
But this portrait was painted by somebody who's in love with him, basically. Like,
so it's like the perfect ideals version of himself.
Yeah. It's like, it's literally been filtered. Like, it doesn't have like puppy ears or little hearts above the head, but it's been filtered through the eyes of someone who really is enamored of him. And therefore, it is the most beautiful representation that it could possibly, is how Basil sees him.
Right.
So.
Which is a beautiful segue into chapter 9, because we got in chapter 8 his friend Harry's reaction to Sibyl Vane's death. And now in 9, Basil comes over and, you know, he couldn't believe that, you know, he couldn't get through. So he got the word that Dorian was out.
Right.
He just kind of took it at face value and goes, "Why? What is he out? Oh, he must be mourning. He must be sad. He must be upset." And he comes over and he says, "You know, Dorian, you must be very distraught." And he's like, "Oh no, I went out to dinner with Harry and we hit the opera."
Yeah. He's like, "You were really at the opera?" He's like, "Yeah, I went to the opera."
Yeah, why wouldn't I go? Sure. It was Patty night.
Yeah, Patty was there.
Patty was singing. Go on, you gotta go on Patty night. Or is that chapter 10? I don't know.
No, I think it was. I don't know.
It was there. Yeah.
We're going.
No, it was chapter 8. It was chapter
Patty
8.
night.
Yeah, it was Patty night. The way they said it, I was like, Patty night? Is this like a thing? Like I have to look up later, but then later in the chapter, it's the singer was named Patty.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, it's Patty night, sure. And for a while, I thought Patty was Harry's sister, but no, Harry's sister is Gwendolyn, who just has a box at
Lady Gwendolyn.
Lady Gwendolyn. So, anyway, so Dorian, now he's talking with Basil. So this, you know, spoiler for this chapter, nothing happens. They just, Basil and Dorian talk.
Well,
but their conversation, right? But their conversation centers more on emotion and why is Dorian not upset like Basil's expecting him to be. And, you know, because he says, "Dorian, how are you over this?" And he's like, "Yeah, it feels like so long ago. Was it really just last night that she died? I don't know." Or the day before, I guess.
He's like, "Yeah, what's past is past." He's like, "You call yesterday past?"
Right.
It was just yesterday. And Dorian is all like,
"Whoop-de-doo! What does it all mean, Basil?"
Oh no! You didn't cue me that you were gonna do that. All right. Exactly. What does it all mean, Basil? See?
Look, we're turning into like a legit podcast.
I know, right? Groovy, baby. Let's work it. That's Harry. Harry taking pictures of Dorian, right? Anyway.
You picture Lord Henry as Austin Powers. He's not so creepy and cringy. He's just
is he not though?
A lovable creep.
I don't know that he was meant to be lovable.
No.
I think in the first movie, he was definitely not meant to be lovable at first.
Who, Austin Powers or Lord Henry?
Yeah, no, Austin Powers. I think he was meant to be sort of creepy.
Oh, well.
And then later, anyway, once the movie became a hit. But,
anyway, Basil's very upset.
So he says, right. So Basil's upset. And, he says, it was only yesterday. How's that past? And Dorian says, what's the actual lapse of time? What's time have to do with it? He says, only shallow people require years to get rid of an emotion. A man who is master of himself can end a sorrow as easily as he can invent a pleasure. I don't want to be at the mercy of my emotions. I want to use them, to enjoy them, and to dominate them.
I think that's called repression and addiction.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, he's not dealing with anything. He just wants to toss it aside and say, well, I experienced that. And I that's kind of a theme here. Dorian was, in the beginning of this book, a really sheltered, naive character. Mm-hmm. And Henry has opened his eyes to beauty and to love. And now, they make reference, and we'll get a little more explicit towards the end of the next chapter. But he just wants to experience life, like every emotion and feeling and, plowing into, they talk about plowing, life is meant to be hedonistic. But hedonism is just seeking pleasure, right? I mean, Dorian wants to experience all emotions.
He thinks this is marvelous that this has happened to him. It's a great chapter or a great piece of his life. And how much time has passed? Like, I know in the upcoming chapters, I read a little bit ahead, and we get an indication of time.
Correct.
From these later chapters. But he says to Basil, I was a schoolboy when you knew me, and I'm a man now. I have new passions, new thoughts, new ideas.
It has been at most 2 months, because we have the scene in the beginning where we first meet Dorian, and then we jump a month to the dinner party. And I think these chapters are happening rather quickly, because he immediately meets Sibyl. So if we chronologically lay this thing out, I think he meets Sibyl Vane pretty much at the end of chapter 1 or 2, right? Like, Harry opens his eyes to beauty. He goes out to the theater. He meets Sibyl Vane. We jump to the dinner party a month later. And that's kind of where he reveals that he's met Sibyl Vane. He's been going to the theater every night. And Harry's like, well, where you been? So, I think at most we're at like a month or two here. I mean, Sibyl's only just learned his first name.
So it only takes a few months to pass into manhood. Is that your experience? Just, that's it.
Well, I mean, we don't stop making, our brains aren't fully developed until like 25, and Dorian's not even 18, we don't think.
Yeah, he's 17.
Right, we think he's still 17.
I mean, but he's packed a lot of life in, right?
He has.
He has 2 boyfriends, or at least 2 very good friends.
2 very good friends.
And he is the love of like everyone. He's a philanthropist with Lady Agatha or whatever her name is.
Right.
He met Sibyl, thought he was in love, then she killed herself. So like he has had a lot of sudden life experience just smashed into there. And then whatever he thinks of Henry's philosophizing. Is that how I say that?
Right. Yeah.
So he's gotten a lot of new thoughts. So he must feel. He clearly feels like he's grown more than someone with more experience would. And what's experience anyway, right? That's
right. We don't need that.
No.
So, I mean, he has no father. He has no father figure even. I mean, he was raised by his uncle or something, like the old lord.
Who he hates.
He detested, who was like very, very, very old. And so he's really, his quote unquote father figure here is Basil and Henry, right? It's sort of 2 poles, 2 sides of this, his influence, right? His exemplar of sort of manhood in this time. And so he says explicitly that he has learned, so he kind of lays it on Basil's feet, right? So Basil is very shocked that Dorian is so self-centered at this point, and he says to him basically that he's learned to be vain from Basil.
That's not fair. It's really Lord Henry's fault.
Well, Basil painted the picture of him that he's so fallen in love with, though. Right? This picture of Dorian Gray, which is the greatest thing ever painted. Anyway.
I don't know. He towards the end, he says so Basil admits, like, the interesting thing is he doesn't want him to see the painting, right?
Right.
He refuses to let him see the painting, and Basil's like, come on, man, let me see it. It's my greatest achievement. I want to exhibit it, which he said he wasn't going to do in the first place. Now he says he's going to do it. Dorian's horrified, and he's like, you can't see it. You can never see it. There's something wrong with it. And Basil's like, oh my God, he sees me. He sees the love I poured.
Yes.
So he makes this long confession to Dorian.
Well, he tells me he has a secret, and Dorian's like, you got to tell me your secret now. And he's like, no, I can't tell you my secret. Which, of course, at that point, anybody that ever says that to you're going to get it out of them, because they obviously want to tell you their secret.
Yeah, so once again, two people think they're talking about the same thing.
Right.
And they're not.
Right.
But we don't get both sides. Like, at least he doesn't tell Basil that, no. This is what's happening.
And wasn't it a little heartbreaking? So once Basil tells him his secret that, I've poured too much of my soul into this picture and my love into this picture, and Dorian's like, oh, that's it? That was kind of a lame secret.
Yeah.
And Basil's like, oh man, I shouldn't have told you.
Yeah.
He feels kind of stupid for telling him.
Well, he says, how old's Basil? Also early 20s or late teens. I don't remember.
I mean, I am picturing Basil and Henry in sort of their mid-20s, early to mid-20s, and Dorian's a little younger, right?
So he's just told him, you're made to be worshipped. Like, he just bore his emotional soul. Basically, I'm so in love with you, and you've changed everything in my life. Like, in your teens, even telling someone, like, I think you're cute, could be mortifying.
Right, exactly.
And he's just confessed his whole soul, and Dorian doesn't care.
Right. He kind of rebuffs the confession, is like, whatever.
He's so relieved that he doesn't know that the picture's changing because his soul is disgusting.
Right.
But he does say that he likes Basil better than Lord Henry. He tells him, you are better than him. You're not as interesting, maybe, or you're not, whatever, but you're better than him. And he says Lord Henry had the charm of being very dangerous, but that was all. And he was too clever and too cynical to be really fond of. And so Dorian's left wondering, is there anyone that would ever fill me with the kind of feeling that Basil feels towards me? And he's looking, is that one of the things life has in store?
Yeah.
Maybe. Although he didn't feel that. Sibyl felt that way about him, but he didn't feel that way about her. But maybe he thought he did for like a second. And now he knows he doesn't, obviously.
He definitely wants that feeling, and that's why he was going for it. Right?
I think so. I don't think... Can you get that feeling if you're a cruel, vicious person? Can both things exist in one? Can you truly love things if you are also truly cruel? I guess you can. People are...
Narcissists. I mean, you could love yourself.
I guess you could, yeah.
I mean, we generally, in life and fiction and art, we think of love then moderating and changing a person who is cruel. Like, Ebenezer Scrooge or the Grinch or any of those characters that find some love outside of themselves and suddenly become a better person. But yeah, are there any examples of a cruel character who also feels love? Maybe Thanos. I mean, he wanted to destroy half the universe, but it was for love of the universe that he was trying to save it by destroying half of it.
The destruction of the thing that you love. I'm thinking of two things. So one book that we couldn't read on the podcast, but it's a really great book called The Narrow Road to the Deep North. It's excellent contemporary fiction. And the author's name is escaping me, but it's a guy. Anyway, in that
narrows it down to 50% of the population.
Fair. In that, there's a character, a Japanese general during World War II, I think, and they're building a great railroad through the jungle in Siam. I'm not great.
Really feels like you've read this book.
I've read it twice.
Oh, wow.
But like the historical fiction-y part, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Anyway, the characters are Tasmanian and Australian, and they're POWs in a Japanese prison camp. And this general, I think he's a general or whatever they call them, he is so cruel during the war. And he like has this obsession with beheading people with his sword. And he talks about it as if it's some kind of art. And then later in the book, when the war is over, and even when the war is going on, he talks about poetry in this way that is just gorgeous. And he loves poetry and he loves art. And it was very disturbing as a reader to be like, oh yeah, me too. I identify with that. Wait, you behead people and you're this horrible, horrible person. So, and that's a fictional character. But then I'm thinking of the like the true crime documentary I watched on Ted Bundy, where he was a horrible mass murderer, and his girlfriend / wife, they never got married, but his longtime girlfriend like didn't know, and he was kind and loving to her and their daughter, or her daughter, who he basically kept accepted as his own, and they loved him. And then suddenly it was like the pieces started to fit together, the car and what he looked like, and they started to realize who he was, and like told the police and stuff. Whatever, you have to watch the documentary. But anyway, did he really love them? And I think when you watched that, they struggle with that too. They're like, the person that loved us, or we think that he loved us, could he have, done those terrible things to us? So like, I think I might be answering my question. And I think people can inhabit both of those things, but one maybe wins out. And so people get changed by love, or they don't, and they go to the dark side. Isn't that what Star Wars is all about?
Or could it be, well, it's actually depends if you're talking, prequel and original trilogy, it's a redemptive story. And if you throw in the sequel trilogy, it's garbage. But anyway, because it completely destroys any kind of redemptive arc any of the characters had. But anyway, we will leave that aside.
Different podcast.
Different podcast. But, in that example, say, would that be... I guess you can't ever know one's soul unless you have a picture of Dorian.
Unless you're Dorian.
Right. Like, do you actually have that love, or is he manipulating the people around him for his ends and playing a role so that they think he is kind and loving and et cetera, et cetera?
I don't know. It sounds like a lot of work to fool people in that way.
I would think so, yeah. Well, at the end of 9, Dorian decides it's too dangerous to have this picture down here. Basil's going to want to see it at some point. I've got to hide it. And so he makes the decision to send the picture upstairs, and we get into chapter 10. I don't think we need to talk much about 10. 10 is just sort of a narrative driver chapter. I don't think there's much to dig out of this one. But he decides to put the picture up in the old schoolroom, up at the top of the house. He gets the key from the housekeeper. He throws a cloth over it. He calls up the frame maker to send some boys over, but the frame maker comes himself because everybody loves Dorian. They take the picture upstairs, and that's about it. Well, and then at the end of the chapter, they put the picture away. End of the chapter, Dorian gets some mail. Well, he needed a pretext to get his housekeeper out of the house, or to get his valet, Victor, out of the house.
He's so strangely suspicious of Victor for no reason.
Well, I think
like
that's
Victor's looking
the
at the
paranoia
picture.
I think that's the paranoia of guilt coming through. Like, he knows, like, he starts to see shadows everywhere. You know, I think that's, you know, they say that's, you know, criminals get caught by being stupid or whatever. I think when you've done something, I think the guilt gnaws at your soul so much you begin to read into other people, whereas they, you know, they don't know your thoughts. Only you know your thoughts. So.
No. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, he becomes suspicious of Victor. So he gets him out of the house, tells him to go, you know, borrow a book from Henry. So Henry sends over not only a book but also the newspaper, which newspaper says that there's been an inquest, basically clearing Dorian. Right. There's been an inquest. The coroner, you know, returns a verdict of death by misadventure, and which is interesting. So basically, that means.
Sounds more fun than it was.
Right, exactly. It's not an accident because an accident is out of your control, but misadventure is basically like overdose, basically. Like, it's something you did to yourself with an unintended consequence of killing yourself. So that's the verdict they return on her. And, you know, he's mad because Harry had marked it, and he thinks, you know, maybe Victor read the page. But anyway, Harry also sends over a book, which is very... I find an interesting parallel because this book itself was considered, you know, very blasphemous and controversial when it came out. Well, this book that Dorian is reading now that Harry sent over, it's a novel, but it's quote lurid in its description of sins. So it's a very, I guess for the 1880s, could we say it's like a sort of pornographic account of this Frenchman going through life and whatever he is encountering. And I love the exchange at the very end of the passage. So Dorian starts reading this book, and he's late for dinner, and he finally goes to dinner with Harry, and Dorian says, "Oh, that book you sent me so fascinated me that I forgot how the time was going." And Harry replies, "Yes, I thought you'd like it." And Dorian says, "I didn't say I liked it, Harry. I said it fascinated me. There's a great difference." And sort of to himself, Henry kind of says, "Oh, you've discovered that." So I don't know. That one really, I was like, I like that. Like, Dorian is becoming at least self-aware enough to know that I don't like this, but it's really intriguing to me. And I think a lot of the darker places, you know, a lot of the evil and sin in the world, I think that's what it is. Like, I don't know if I like this, but man,
Yeah.
I want to peek behind that curtain. I want to go behind that door and see what's going on in there. You know,
Is that why true crime stuff is so popular?
I think so. Yeah, especially now. Yeah,
It's
that's sort of
fascinating.
the bit. It's it's fascinating. Like, it's titillating. It's, you know, it's the freak show at the circus. It's it's horror movie. It's grisly murder. It's graphic violence. It's, you know, you may not quote unquote like it or want to admit you like it, because if you like it, right, that sort of denotes a psychotic personality. But you want to be titillated and excited by those darker elements of life. And I think that's where Dorian is.
And I like that as a reader, what he says about the act of reading it. He says, after a few minutes, he became absorbed. It was the strangest book he had ever read. It seemed to him that an exquisite raiment, and to the delicate sound of flutes. Seemed to him that in exquisite raiment and to the delicate sound of flutes, the sins of the world were passing in dumb show before him. The things he had dimly dreamed of were suddenly made real to him. Things which he had never dreamed were gradually revealed. So it's one, I just like the description of the act of reading. He has become fully absorbed in this book. The book is almost in a similar way that the painting is revealing himself to himself. The book is doing the same in a way. It's showing him his dreams and making his dreams real to him in this act of reading. I think that really good books can do that in general. Like, books can read you and you can be like, oh my God, how did this book know that I was going through this, or I felt this way, or that this character is like me, or whatever. But that's what he's experiencing through whatever this novel about this Parisian is. I wonder if it's a real book that he's like,
yeah, I was wondering.
Wilde's got in his mind.
Or perhaps not. Perhaps it's just, I thought of it as, Dorian is growing up, basically, right? It's like when you move from reading kid literature and you read, like, adult fiction, you're like, oh, what is this stuff? I've heard these terms, or I've heard this or that, but what is that? Is that what this is? I think maybe the first time, nowadays kids have the internet, so, things, I think kids, at a much younger age know things that probably our generations didn't know until we were much older.
Maybe.
But I think that's what's going on here, is he's just discovering things he's only heard of before. Polite society doesn't talk about it, but this book is.
I wonder if that's true about kids, because you also have a lot more control as a parent. You can lock things and put codes on things, and I guess
kids can get around those.
Kids have always gotten around stuff for their whole life. I guess you could go to a friend's house, but you don't have any television for not any, but you rarely let your kids watch TV, and I'm sure they don't use the internet unsupervised. Vincent doesn't. He's 4, but like he's not allowed to. We watch everything that he's using because, also he mimics everything. So if he watches anything, suddenly he is that character. He loves Ethan Gamer. Like, hey gamers, today I'm playing, and it's like, okay,
all right, it's gonna be a streamer before he's 10.
And he becomes Hulk, and he becomes literally anything. He becomes Fiona from Shrek, and then I have to be Shrek, or vice versa. Ben's been Fiona, I've been Shrek. Switch roles, but we're always playing pretend in that way. And I guess older kids don't necessarily do that. They grow out of that extreme pretend.
Yeah, that's how they learn and grow, is they mimic and experiment.
But I feel like I could sort of protect him for now. Ugh. I feel like I'll regret that someday.
Keep thinking that. We have older parents on the podcast. They're like, keep thinking that. You'll keep them safe, sure. Because we thought that too, right? Like, there gets to be a point where you can't. So, for the longest time, and you're still in that zone, you can read everything before they read it. You can watch every movie before they watch it. You can totally control it. Now there's no way. Like,
it's
we
just
used to.
Too much.
There's just too much, and especially with 3 of them now. Fortunately, my younger 2, one doesn't read, and the other one only reads Pokemon books. But like with Ellen, she you can't read the amount of books that she reads. She's constantly reading. And no, nobody can. And we've every once in a while we'll grab something and we're like, oh, is this what she's reading? And we'll kind of probe and be like, so what did you think about? And she doesn't bring up like whatever content we were concerned about. And we're like, did she not she probably A, didn't understand it, and B, didn't lend the gravity to it that we did, shall we say? Because you look back on stuff you watch as a kid and you're like, oh, hey, is that what I watched as a kid? I never caught X, Y, or Z in this show or this movie. So I think a lot of it goes over their heads. And at this point, I think Dorian is now being exposed to these things that are no longer going over his head.
And he likes it.
He does. It's new, it's exciting, it's something he's never seen before, and it's titillating to him. So,
well, what's up for the next pod? Are we ready to transition?
Yeah, we are ready to transition. So for the next pod, we're going to read up to 14.
Through 14.
Chapter 14. Through 14. So 4 chapters, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And you'll get that, should be tomorrow. Hopefully this will come out.
When it's ready.
When it's ready. But inshallah, it'll be tomorrow if you're listening to this on release day. And yeah, I think this next section is going to be, at least as soon as I started reading it, I was like, oh, hey, all right, we're just jumping in with both feet. So maybe things will pick up a little bit here from this point on. But anyway, if you are enjoying these books, we have, this is our 7th or 8th book, I think that we're doing right now.
Episode 60.
Right. it's episode 60. We have been doing this for quite some time. So right now, if you're listening to this podcast right now, just pop a browser open, pull open iTunes, go over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Let us know how we're doing. And tell a friend. And, make your own little book club with you and your friends. And you can all listen to these books and discuss and have fascinating conversations.
I felt like you were about to go into like an NPR like fundraising bit. If you like what you're hearing, just give us a call and donate whatever you got.
At the $60 level, you get this beautiful CYST tote. Yeah, no. No merch. We're not there. But yeah, you can also hit us up on our social medias. We are at CYST Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and that other social network that I will not name at this point, but starts with an F and ends with a K. Wink, wink. Firetruck.com. You can also send us an email, especially if you're under 25. We are still challenging any 25-year-old out there or younger. Do you still use email on the reg? I don't think you do, but you can email us. The email address is cystpod@gmail.com. And that's it for this week.
That's it.
It is. So, hey, it is the school fair tonight. So why don't you go out there and win yourself one of those sweet wooden canes?
Peace. What is a sweet wooden cane?
You did. Come on.